Hello to friends of the Museum of South Texas History. My name is Francisco Ajardo. I'm the Chief Executive Officer of the museum, and I'm very happy to welcome the world to our inaugural Museum Plática. So this is what we have in store for today and probably in ensuing Museum Pláticas. So what we want to do with our audience is share what it is that we have at the museum. We want to tell stories about what we have in our archives and collections and artifacts, and we want to share with the community what we have in our exhibits and in our galleries, and we want to share with the community what we do in terms of programming and that sort of thing. So really this is about taking the museum out to the world as best as we can. Our inaugural episode, which is today, will focus on three different things. The first thing is that I will have a plática, a conversation, with Pam Morales de Hendricks, who really is the innovator of this Museum Plática series. And so Pam has been working for about 5 years at the museum as the communications officer. And so she will articulate her vision on this. And so I really look forward to that conversation because while I share in the vision, I think that Pam has greater clarity about this. After Pam, then we're going to move into a conversation with Lynne Beeching, who has been at this museum for 30 years as the development officer. And so Lynne will talk about the next big public program that we have, which is really a program that we have out on our ranch, and it is the Great Historical Shootout. And so we look forward to that. And then from Lynne, we'll move into our third segment in this program, and that will be a conversation with Kelly Francis Love, who leads our archives and collections. And so Kelly and I will have a conversation about some of the real gems in this treasure in this Museum of South Texas History. So when we come back, after we pause here, we will resume with our Museum Plática with Pam. So, thank you. Yeah, that was awkward in the end, but okay. Welcome back to our Museum Plática. And so as Pam moves from her, I don't know what this is. She's working at TriCaster this morning. And so it looks like it's not an editing kind of thing. It's a TriCaster that the museum just invested in like during the pandemic because we wanted to do this kind of programming. So Pam is going to make her way over here to the table with me as I enjoy a little bit of my cafecito, because this is it's very difficult to have a plática without coffee. Pam, you should know that, right? You don't have your coffee this morning.
No, I have a nice coffee.
Okay. All right. So, Pam, you announced to me and to other staff members that you want to explore this idea of a museum plática. So why don't you share with us what it was that you were thinking in terms of a vision and where we could go with this? What are the possibilities?
Well, I think the pandemic really opened our eyes to digital content producing, and as we were coming along with, the digital content aspect of it, which is a production, because obviously you need the production in order to make that happen. And I really thought about the TriCaster because it helps with the graphics and have different audio and video inputs, just like we're doing right now. It's sort of similar to Zoom. I mean, I'm pretty sure people by now know what Zoom is, right? But the Zoom quality when you're sharing your screen, like video and things like that, not so great. And then also graphic-wise, not so great either. So that's why I thought maybe the TriCaster would be a great way to incorporate as part of our digital content production. And I feel like, this is our first one. We already had some technical difficulties, but I think that's the sort of the creative process. And, we're just going to get better because, we're a museum and it's the 21st century, right? Everyone loves digital, and everyone watching on social media, thank you for your patience.
So a couple of things, Pam. One is that I think we would be disappointed if we didn't have problems, right? So we got to have problems because only with problems do we learn and improve and get better and that sort of thing. So that's one. The other is that so the audience would have seen that the integration of images. For example, as we came back from the break, you saw a photograph, a historical photograph that we have in our archives in our photo collection. And I think it was a photograph of before 1970, because this museum opened in April 1970, 51 years ago to this month, actually to a couple of days ago on April the 19th. And so I think the photograph was right before the museum opened its doors to what is the old 1910 jail in 1970. So it's a very, very cool kind of integration, right? I mean, that's, with technologies, it's kind of easy to do it. We could even do it with Zoom, but you're right, we don't have the same quality of, of the photograph and that sort of thing. So that's my second point. But the other point that I wanted to ask is really more of a question. Who are you? Who are you? Where do you come from? I know you come from your mother and your father, but where are you from and how did you come to this moment where you are now innovating in the museum with new technologies? What's your prep like?
So I am from FAR. I went to the PSJA school districts, the school district and the schools, went to UTPA, graduated 2011, and it was a Bachelor of Arts in Mass Communication with a concentration in broadcast journalism. So really I've always wanted to be a TV reporter, but then life happened, and then now that I'm a little bit older, I realized that it's probably not the life that I wanted because it's a lot of work. I'm already sweating right now from all the work that I've been doing. But
hang on. So when you say TV reporter, like you were attracted to what? Like the glamour and the being in the story, being right in front of action and that sort of thing, or what?
Yeah, I think I grew up watching a lot of ABC News, so a lot of like newscasts and CBS and things like that. So I wanted to be like the female version. I mean, obviously there's no female version, I think, to Peter Jennings. I mean, there is, it's Barbara Walters, right? But I felt like I could be better than Barbara Walters. I don't know. I was just, so like I watched a lot of Peter Jennings, and then I grew up in a time where the Iraq war was happening, so I thought, oh, that'd be awesome to go, to the war zones and report on it. Now that I'm older, I'm like, what was I thinking? Why would I be so crazy to go to Iraq and cover that? I don't know. So I don't think it was a glamour per se. I think it was the storytelling. And being at the museum for the past 5 years, I think that's why I've stuck around, because museums tell stories, and that's what I like to do. So that's sort of my craft, I think.
Okay, so then how does Museum Plática or the Museum Pláticas become a storytelling instrument?
So I am a firm believer that, we do have the media, right? I appreciate them because they're the ones that also tell our stories and they come to the museum and things like that. But I think we are the best ones to tell our stories. So I think Museum Pláticas, its main function, or the goal that I want it to have, is for us to tell our stories the way we want to tell them. I'm all for the objective media and all of that, but I think because they're so busy with other stuff that we're probably at the bottom of the pecking order. So if we can be a 21st century museum with a half-hour show talking about what we do here, I think that is awesome.
So one last question. So you would have been about 15 years old when Peter Jennings died.
Yeah.
So there's something there about the impact on a child of seeing things, visual, seeing a storyteller. Can you speak to that and how that connects to any of this?
I think the reason for me, I like the half hour because Peter Jennings and other people, they did their half-hour shows, and I thought that was so awesome that they were kind of just reporting what was happening. And then of course you have your typical packages, which is like the reporter going out to different places and reporting what they're seeing. And I think something about that, for me at least, was very informational, and it made me think more worldly and globally. And I mean, eventually, now I'm more about regional stories, and I feel like that love of that format has now come into the museum world with me.
Well, I think that's a very interesting foundational set of ideas that come together, in your own experience, in your own vision, maybe in your own dreams. So let's get into some of those, Pam. So after this break of Museum Plática, we will come back to have a chat with Lynne Beeching of the museum.
Let me go.
Well, hang on, because that's live.
Wait,
that.
yeah.
It was, so just chill.
Wait, so then am I going on break? Am I going on break now?
You're going on break.
Okay, hold on. Let me go fix it. Oh, you see me?
Because it's now
Photo bomb.
14 people are watching us now,
Okay.
which is really terrific. Yeah. We started off with 4 or 5 for a while. All right, Lynne, you want to come up? Okay, welcome back to the Museum Plática. And before I move into this Plática with Lynne, I just want to say, Rod EC, thank you for being on the program. And so I'd like to know more about you, Rod EC. So who are you? Tell us, give us your name, maybe where you're from. Also, Robin Davila, thank you, Robin, for chiming in. And so, Robin, I think you got your question answered. You asked, is there a link I can send to my history teachers that is not Facebook based? And so Robin is an administrator in the Edinburgh School District. I think, Robin, unless you went to another school district. So my apologies if you did, and I don't know that. But Robin is very interested in sending some of this so that history teachers can learn stuff. Lynne, What do you think of that? History teachers kind of chiming in and learning a thing or two for the
I think
museum.
it's great. That's what we're here to do, is to teach people about history, and teachers that teach history need to know it, right? And I'm glad they're tuning in.
Lynn, how do you come to this idea called, a museum here in your hometown of Edinburgh? Who are you and how did you get into this?
Well, I grew up here in Edinburgh, and I grew up with an interest in history, but when I was in school many years ago, we did not have any lessons about our local or regional history. Nothing happened below San Antonio. After the Alamo, that was it, right? And so I grew up thinking nothing ever happened here. And when this museum opened, I came here as a child and then later came back as a volunteer in the early 80s and became a docent. And I was just surprised to see that this is really a neat region, and we have a very rich history here that no one seemed to know about. So I'm proud to have been a part of that, so that now people know.
A couple of things you said there. Number one, docent, so
Yes,
that may
yeah.
be in the vernacular of the museum world. So
Yeah.
can you tell our audience what a docent is and the function of a docent?
Yeah, most people kind of think of docents as a tour guide, but I think they're much more than a tour guide. They're interpreters of the objects and the images that we have in our exhibits. And docents help the visitor, the people on the tour, to look a little deeper, look a little closer at the objects and what they represent, the stories that they tell us. So.
Lynn, what is your family history? Because there's something that's interesting about the narrative of your family and how that could have been a source of inspiration, motivation for you to know more.
Oh, yeah, I guess so. Both sets of my grandparents came here in the early 20th century. One set came from Michigan and the other from Missouri. And my parents grew up here and met and married and, all of that. And my father was the president of Golden Jersey Creamery. And I always laughed because, when I started working here at the museum, the address at the time was 121 East McIntyre, and he spent his entire career at 121 West McIntyre, just across the way at Golden Jersey. And I'm like, interesting. But my, just having those family roots here was important to me, and they came here and they made this their home. They didn't talk much about Michigan and Missouri. I mean, they considered themselves South Texans. And so I guess that there. And then when we would go on vacations and such, my father always stopped at all the little museums and the big museums along the way. And we made sure we went to all the museums. So I have a love for museums.
As the valley was taking shape, the modern valley of the 20th century, because we know that there's such a rich and deep history of this place. Even before Escandon came in the 1750s with families, to settle the area, there's thousands of years of people living here and surviving here. But when your family came in the early 20th century, which is really kind of the taking off of, the Magic Valley, did your family come as part of the land parties or as part of that movement?
Yes, they did. Again, from Michigan and Missouri. Let's see, somewhere in the family archives there is a poster of an announcement of a meeting, a gathering, and the promoters of the Magic Valley would go up into the Midwest looking for farmers, really, that maybe want to come down and take advantage of a year-round growing season rather than one growing season. And they were very attracted to that. So they came down on the train, took a look at the area, and from what we understand that a lot of the promoters let you see just the best part of it. And this is going to be cleared land and all this kind of thing. And one set of grandparents had a good experience, the other one not so much. But anyway, my grandfather Donegan started with the Grove industry and did that till he got sick. And my other grandfather he had a truck, and that's how he made a living. He delivered things and for other people, because not many people had trucks down here. So that's kind of their story.
So one was Donegan and the other one was
Braden. Yeah.
So was there out in San Carlos some sort of like a citrus operation that was run by Donegans? No, that would have
Well,
been.
no, it was La Blanca around that
In La
area.
Blanca?
Yeah, yeah.
Is that the one that was sold to the Perez family?
I don't know.
Okay.
Sorry, I don't know any
Interesting.
details about that, but
I'll need to check on that because there's an interesting story of a fellow who came as a bracero in the 1950s, and he worked in a citrus operation, really in San Carlos. And then when the owner then decided to sell, he sold to this man who came as a bracero, slept in the cots there in the bodega,
yeah.
and then stayed and worked with that farm for, I don't know, 30, 40 years.
Oh, really?
And then when the old man did not have children who wanted to continue that, he sold it to this guy named Hector Perez, who's a deacon at the church in San Carlos.
Oh, really?
And now he's the owner of Perez Groves.
Oh, there you go. Well, I don't know that there's a connection
Yeah.
there, but that's
But
that's a
that
neat
that
story.
could be another
Could be,
another
you
family.
never
But
know.
how about that?
You never
So,
know.
Lynn, you talk about like all these advertisements, right? And these, so talk about the advertisement that is upon us right now, because you're here to sell an idea.
Yes, yes. Well, I think our audience, if they tune in not only today but in future Pláticas, that you're going to see that there's a lot of wonderful things that happen here at this museum, and those things really can't happen without support and funding. And so one of my jobs as development officer is to put on fundraising events. So today I wanted to tell everybody about the Great Historical Shootout. We've revived that idea from a couple of years ago, and it's going to be next Saturday on May 1st. It is a fun morning, a friendly competition of clay shooting, sport shooting. And so we hope people will, those that like to do that kind of thing would like to come out and form a team. The format is a 4-person team. There'll be 15 stations that you move one after another, and 100 clay birds. And one of the other things that it takes to put on an event like this too is to have support from our business community, and our good friends at HEB should be.
So this is
Never
we're
mind.
doing some product placement here, and we like HEB because HEB not only has been a supporter of this museum for many
Yes.
years, but during the pandemic, HEB came up big in terms of just support of this organization that we were in as much of a volatile and uncertain state as anybody else was, but HEB came in and said, how can we be a good neighbor, a good partner? And so we love HEB because of its good work that it does in the community, but also because HEB is a good partner. And so HEB is helping with this shootout.
Yeah, HEB was our first and longest giving corporate donor of the museum. So they've been supporting us for many years, but really came up really well for us in 2020 with the idea of supporting our year-long golden anniversary celebration, which of course the pandemic interrupted. But anyway, we were very grateful for that, and they've come back to help us with the Great Historical Shootout. And not only are they helping us with the expenses, but they are also going to be serving a wonderful lunch from their True Texas Barbecue. If you've not been to the Trenton store, you may not know that there's a wonderful barbecue restaurant inside the store now. And that's going to be the lunch for the shooters on May 1st. Now, we're also excited about this event because it's going to be our first live in-person event again since the pandemic. And we want to remind everybody we're still going to ask you to wear your masks and watch your distance and wash your hands while you're out there, but we feel like it'll be safe and it'll be a beautiful spring morning.
So one other thing I want to say, Lynn, is that I think we'll see the photograph come up shortly here, but you and I are standing in a physical space where the HEB was.
We are.
Through a good part of the 20th century here in Edinburgh, Texas. So, the museum at some point, right? I think it was like the 80s, I think, would buy this actual physical space that used to be HEB. So there's this historical symmetry that it's
That's
inescapable.
right. I think this was the first HEB store in Edinburgh here. And prior to that, there was a Piggly Wiggly next door too. So it's been a grocery store, but yes, like I
right.
said, HEB's been connected with us very nicely for many years, and we appreciate them.
Well, Lynn, thank you very much.
welcome.
For all your good work, and I think it's almost like service, that you provided over a period of so many decades to this museum. Because you've been working at this museum for over 30 years, but previous to that, you were a member of the Museum Guild.
I was, yes.
So, and you were probably still a kid.
Well, I was much younger than I am now, that's for sure. But I think it was about 1984 is when I came on and joined the Museum Guild, which was a group of volunteers. And I became a docent, then later on became a board member, and then staff. And it's really been a pleasure. It's been deeply satisfying, all the way along the way, and very proud of what so many people have come together to build. And the fact that our community has been with us every step of the way. And I think we're just a community that really respect and are proud of our heritage here, and we know that our history and heritage are worth preserving for future generations.
Well, Lynn, it's been such a privilege not only to work with you, but to have you as part of the team. So
Thank you.
Thank you for that.
Thank you, and thank you for letting me go on the maiden voyage of this show.
Well, you always wanted to be in front of the camera.
Never would have thought 30 years ago that we'd be doing this, so this is great.
So we're going to go on break, another Museum Plática break, and when we come back, we'll be joined by our archivist, Kelly Francis Love. So we will return in a bit. Okay, welcome back to Museum Pláticas. As it turns out, we tried to get rid of Lynn and said, Lynn, you're out. But Lynn said, give me a few more seconds. So actually, Lynn, we missed on some important information here. If you could just share it.
We got a little sidetracked on things, but if anyone is interested in coming out on a beautiful spring morning for the shootout, the Great Historical Shootout, we have a few slots left for teams, 4-man teams. Just call the museum at this number. It's $500 for a team. If you'd like to show your support and can't shoot or won't be there, you can certainly do that by becoming a station sponsor for $350. Or if you want to do both, we have a combo, a team and a station sponsor for $800. We'll have mulligan drawing and also an Annie Oakley contest as well. So I hope to see you all out there. Give us a call, 383-6911. Say, hey, I'm interested in Great Historical Shootout. We'll take care of you. Thank you.
Thanks so much. Appreciate it. All right, so we're going to transition from Lynn to Kelly. So Kelly, join the stage, if you will. All right, so Kelly, how about if you do a quick introduction of who are you, where are you from, how'd you get here, when did you get here?
Okay. My name is Kelly Francis Love, and I am the archivist and collections team leader here at the museum. I'm actually from Columbus, Ohio, and I
This is me. I was warned not to, but I was doing this timer. Go ahead. Kelly. My
Okay.
apologies.
I actually am from Columbus, Ohio. I came to the museum in 2017. I came down as the archivist, and then in early 2019, I also became the collections team leader.
So Kelly, the museum is really nothing if it doesn't have an archive, a collection, and artifacts, really to build stories around, right? Can you just speak to that idea and then how that idea expresses itself here at the museum?
Sure. And of course, obviously, since that's what I do, I firmly agree with you that a museum can't exist without its collections. And the museum has been collecting items since before we even became a museum. Since the idea of a museum even began, we've been collecting items. And so we have artifacts and archives on any number of topics. And we know what we have, and so sometimes we try and take those things, saying we know we have this great item, let's figure out how we can build an exhibit around it.
So I saw that, so we have, in our galleries, we have the Rio Grande Legacy exhibit, right? And so that's the river frontier, river highway, river crossroads. And so we've had that up for almost 20 years. And it's a gorgeous gallery and exhibits, right? Children really enjoy it. People who come and visit really enjoy it. We have a brand new exhibit that is the 1910 jail exhibit that was just installed here in the last few months. In that exhibit is a pistol that was owned by a guy named Pancho Garza, who in 1899 used that pistol to try to assassinate John Klausner.
Yes.
Is that the story?
That is the story, yes.
But the story of that pistol is that pistol was donated to this museum before the museum even opened its doors.
Yes, that pistol was donated to the museum actually in 1968. It became our first accessioned object. And so it's been in storage for a number of years, so it's great to see it be used in that jail exhibit.
Wow. So give the audience an idea of how it looks and how they can see it when they come in and go to the jail exhibit.
So it is in the 1910 jail exhibit. It's in what is called the jail office, the room that was probably the sheriff's office. And there is a gun case in that room that displays a number of guns that would have been used around that time period, whether by law enforcement or by the criminals that were jailed. And so that one is kind of a cross. I guess it was used by a criminal, but for an official. So it's kind of a cross artifact.
So the story, as I understand it, was that John Klausner, who became sheriff of Hidalgo County in 1890, and at that time, the sheriffs were really like the people in power. There was a county judge, but it was a sheriff who held power. And so Klausner was in power for a while, 1890 to about maybe 1914 or so, as a sheriff. But he was also not very well liked by some people, people who he would have taken to jail. And so in the letters of John Klausner, there are letters that he wrote that we know of because he wrote them to James B. Wells, who was a big boss of the political machine, in the 1880s, 1890s, into the early 1900s. And so Wells and Klausner were communicating, not like this. So they wrote letters to each other, and in one of those letters, Klausner says to Wells, "Yeah, I've been accused of roughing people up, and maybe I have on occasion." So he was roughing people up, who he would send to jail. Well, the roughing people up had consequences, because there were at least 2 attempts on his life, including that one by Pancho Garza.
Well, Pancho, yes.
Yeah, and so the story is that he was just kind of the guy who was hired, right? So he wasn't a guy who would have been, the subject of, of bullying by Klausner. But so we have the pistol, and that's important to this museum. What other stuff do we have that's really cool stuff in our collections and artifacts?
Well, another early donation to the museum, I don't know the year off the top of my head, but very early donation was a bed. And this bed is known as Cama de Muertos. It was a bed used by a local family that whenever they knew a family member was getting close to that time in their life, the close to death, that they would use this bed, and it became the family's deathbed. which is definitely something most families probably don't have anymore.
So, so this museum has been a real leader in Dia de los Muertos for many years. In fact, at our last Sunday speaker series, Fran Alger, the director in the late 70s and into the 80s, spoke of, the innovative power of this museum to put out Dia de los Muertos. But that wasn't until the 80s. This Cama de Muertos, this museum had before that.
Yes, we've
From
had
when?
it since at least in 1970, maybe before that.
But you know that since 1970 because it's in the records.
Yes.
Interesting. So that Cama de Muertos could have been kind of an antecedent to the Dia de los Muertos thing?
It definitely could have been, yes.
Interesting. What else do we have?
Something that was a recent item that we received was a letter from a Civil War. He was a Civil War doctor who served upon a ship that was involved in, well, I think you know.
Yes. No,
The
yes.
Texas
So this
blockade, yes. I think you know more about this letter than I do, but actually there was just an article about it published in
Southwestern
Southwest.
Historical
Yep.
Quarterly. Yeah. So there was this guy named Heber Smith. Later, when he was in his 30s or 40s, he would change his name to Ernest Heber Smith, but his name at birth was Heber, Heber Smith. He was from upstate New York, and was schooled by his father, and then they sent him off to school, and then he would finish medical training by the age of 21. And when he finished his medical training was in 1861 when the Civil War erupted. And so this guy would become an assistant surgeon in the Civil War, and then he would be assigned to a ship that was controlling the Gulf of Mexico, patrolling the Gulf of Mexico to stop the running of goods, munitions and cotton and that sort of thing from the Confederacy. So this guy was a surgeon with the Union forces. And so when he was here in the Gulf of Mexico, he wrote letters. And so he wrote letters over a period of like 4 or 5 days in June of 1863. June of 1863, Kelly, is the Gettysburg Campaign. June of 1863 is what turns the whole history of this country around. Lincoln would give the Gettysburg Address in November of 63 to commemorate what had been done, this landmark, but it was June and July of 63. So as this stuff is happening, in the East Coast, the war is happening here too, in South Texas. And we just happen to have this letter that Tom Ford, our historian here, found at an auction, and he bought it, and we have the original letters. And so there was this guy, right, this researcher who wrote an article and published it in the Southwestern Historical Quarterly, and it's a gem.
Yes, it is. He was able to get in touch with Heber Smith's descendants and get a lot of photos and additional information about his life both before and after the war. So having such a complete history on an artifact like that is just amazing. It's
That's
rare that
terrific.
we see that happen.
That's terrific. So in the spirit of letters, we have a collection of letters from a recipient of the Medal of Honor, a local, an Edinburgh resident, a native son, Freddie Gonzalez. Can you speak to that?
Yes, and I think most people have probably heard about Freddie Gonzalez. Seen the streets named after him, the school named after him, and the museum has had a long relationship with his mother, with Dolia. She donated his uniform to us, the Congressional Medal of Honor, his Purple Heart. Those things have been on exhibit in the museum for a long time. One of the things that she had, and evidently she tried to donate to us 20 years ago, were letters that Freddie wrote home to her when he was away in Vietnam. When she tried 20 years ago, it was just too hard for her. That's the last connection she had to her son. But she's getting older now. She's decided that she was ready, and she knew that the museum would be a good home for them.
So it's about 150 letters that Freddie wrote to his mother, to his grandmother, to other people that were close to him. And those 150 letters are kind of split between his first tour of duty and then his second tour of duty, he was a prolific letter writer, and just very plain speaking, but, in total, it's this unbelievable and rich collection of letters, of this guy who was killed at the age of 21 at the Battle of Wei in 1968. And, and he sent letters to his mother that she did not get until after he was killed. And so it's also a very kind of an emotional journey to go through these letters. So
It is. I'm a mother myself. And when I was going through these letters, unfortunately, they were not organized when they came to us. So it was just, a bunch of pieces of paper in a box, and I had to try and piece them together and figure out which letter went with what. And so I had to read each and every one of these letters, and some of them were heartbreaking, knowing the outcome. And as a mom, that made it especially rough. So there were times I had to take a break and walk away and do something else because it was just so emotionally tough for me to work on those letters.
So if the community is interested in seeing some of this, Kelly, how would the community see the pistol, the 1863 Civil War letter, the letters of Freddy Gonzalez, or any other thing, right? Because this is we're just scratching the surface. We didn't even talk about the original documents of the Plan de San Diego.
No.
We didn't talk about other things, right? From excavations that have been done along the Rio Grande that really, teach us about the native people who lived here thousands of years ago. We didn't even get into that. But how can the public access any of this?
Yeah, it would take us days. We'd have to have a lot of Pláticas to be able to cover everything in the collections. But if anybody's interested in seeing any of these materials, you can email me, call the museum, email me, and schedule an appointment. The archives are open by appointment only. So you do have to schedule an appointment to see things like the Freddy Gonzalez letters. But the pistol is on display in the 1910 jail exhibit. So you can come to the museum during our regular hours and check out the new exhibit and see that pistol.
Kelly, thank you so much. Thank you for all
Thank
your
you.
good work, and we're also very lucky to have you
Well,
here at
thank
the
you.
museum. Okay, so we are going to take another break from this museum Plática. And when we return, I will be off, but Rene Ballesteros will be here to do a little piece on Reading Ranch. So this is going to be Rene's Reading Ranch. So until the next Plática, I will, see you again. So long, everybody.
Greetings, I'm Linda Tovar, HEB Senior Manager of Public Affairs. HEB is proud to be the Museum of South Texas History's golden partner for its golden anniversary. 50 years of preserving the past and shaping the future of South Texas. In celebration of this milestone, HEB has made a gift to Most History, making it possible for all to visit at no charge throughout the month of April. Join the Golden Memory History Hunt while exploring the Golden Memories exhibit. You might win a golden ticket to a weekly drawing for a $50 HEB gift card. The restored 1910 jail and its new exhibits are now open. Stop by the museum store and receive a free golden tote bag while supplies last. Children can discover amazing things in the Rio Grande Legacy exhibit galleries with a complimentary activity book and souvenir pencil. Remember, safety protocols are still in place at the museum. Wear your mask, watch your distance, and wash your hands while in the museum. Visitors should get a free time ticket before arriving at the museum. Visit the museum's website for specific information or call them. Congratulations, Museum of South Texas History, on 50 years of serving the people of South Texas by preserving and presenting the borderland heritage of South Texas and northeastern Mexico.
Hello, y bienvenidos to Rene's Reading Ranch. My name is Rene, and I will be your host for this monthly segment where we highlight books that you can find in our very own museum store. You can come and visit the museum store during our open hours from Tuesday through Saturday from 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. and Sundays from 1 p.m. to 5 p.m. At the museum store, it's right next to the museum's grand lobby, so it's right at the entrance. We accept cash, card, and for any friends of the museum, anybody who has a membership, they enjoy an extra 10% off of any of their purchases. That's really handy when you're coming in to buy books. And I know that over the years, I've purchased books and it's definitely been something beneficial to have, that 10% off. So today's book that we're highlighting is called Tejano Legacy, the Rancheros and Settlers in South Texas from 1734 to 1900. This book is by Dr. Armando C. Alonso, and it is definitely an amazing piece of researched history, a great secondhand resource to have. Dr. Armando Alonso has taught at Southwest Texas State University. He also taught at University of Texas San Antonio for a little bit, and he's now teaching at Texas A&M in College Station. His research interests are the history of Tejanos and the borderlands of Mexico, and that really comes through in his 1998 publication. So, as I mentioned, this was published in 1998. You can find it at the museum store. Dr. Armando Alonso is a native of the Rio Grande Valley. He was born in Edinburgh, actually. And something interesting is he was our last in-person Sunday speaker last March, right before the pandemic hit. After his presentation, we had to close down, but we continued virtually. So to share a little bit of a summary about this book, I wanted to read some passages and share a couple pieces in here that really kind of get the point across of what this book is about. And I want to share one other thing. As I mentioned, Dr. Alonso is a native of the Valley, and in his acknowledgments at the very beginning, he thanks Al Ramirez of Edinburgh, who provided me with the colonial map and photos of the Vela family. He also thanks George Gause, the Director of Special Collections at the University of Texas at Pan American, which is now our UTRGV, University of Texas Rio Grande Valley. And finally, he also thanks David Mikey of the Hidalgo County Historical Museum, who assisted his research with local history materials. So this book that you can buy in the museum store is directly connected to our museum and our research materials too. So with Dr. Alonso's work, he says that this is a history of the lower valley of Texas, from its Spanish colonial roots to 1900. It examines the creation of frontier communities during the Spanish and early Mexican period and the persistence of those communities following the United States' occupation of the lower valley during the Mexican-American War. Wow. So this history is from the Spanish expansion into Nuevo Santander and all the way up into 1900. And in here, there is a very special map, a significant map. I call this the map here at the museum. It might be a little bit difficult to see, but it says Colonia del Nuevo Santander. And it's a little hard to see, but up here, there's the Rio Bravo River coming from the Gulf, and you can find little communities like Reynosa, Camargo, and even Los Salineros, which is the Salt Lakes. So that's just in the beginning. Let me share a couple other pieces. Dr. Alonso goes on to talk about some of the parties that used to happen at the ranchos down here in South Texas. He said dances were called funciones, held at someone's rancho that were also popular. Some rancheros like Don Patricio Gonzalez of Edinburgh had plataformas, or specific areas designated as dancing grounds. He had one at his rancho and one in town. He held funciones frequently. He sounded like the party guy. Now, not everyone liked the relaxed social mixing of all classes that occurred at such public spaces. The Garza sisters also remember that their mother did not especially like the idea that a small fee was charged and that males had to buy pan dulce, or Mexican pastries, to give to those who danced with them. So this is something documented in the history. Could you imagine going up to somebody asking for a dance and saying, here's an empanada? That's part of Tejano legacy. Now, one last passage I wanted to share with y'all today. This is towards the end of the book, and Dr. Alonso quotes Emilio Jr. Ramirez, who noted that in ranch communities where one or several large landholders and a community of workers resided, numerous opportunities presented themselves for communal activities, such as special days for baking bread, having quilting parties, and the slaughtering of livestock, as well as the customary religious and secular holidays. So in the early days of rancheros and settlers in South Texas from 1734 to 1900, there was a lot of activity, there were social functions, and that legacy continues today. Right, and this book, as I mentioned, can be found at the museum store, and it's really just one of the ways that we connect with the past here at the Museum of South Texas History. And with that being said, thank you for visiting Rene's Reading Ranch. We'll hopefully see you at the museum store. And until next time, siguen leyendo. Adios.